I'd like to call the meeting to order. Note, these meetings may be recorded and posted on the Wheatland County website and or social media. Like to get an adoption of the agenda. Any additions?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. Apologies from our Reeve Glenn Kester, and he'd like to ask for permission to be excused from the April 3rd council meeting as he had prior commitments.
Sorry, does that require a motion now? No? Okay. Any other additions? The two letters?
Mr. Chairman, there's a letter from Nathan Cooper in regards to the ambulance response that's been handed out, as well as a response from the Ombudsman's office in regards to the same matter. And we'd also like to request council look at establishing a planning and priorities committee meeting in the third week of May. So if we could add that to the agenda as well, please.
So should we add the two letters to correspondence and information, 5.2? And then we can just discuss the other at lunch or whatever. Fair enough. Anything else? Motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll move.
All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes, 1.3A, March 6, 2018. Had a chance to look.
I'll move that we adopt the minutes from the March 6th regular council meeting.
All in favor? Carried. 1.3B, March 6, 2018, public hearing minutes, bylaw 2017-46 and 2017-59. Chance to look at the minutes.
I'll move those, Mr. Chairman.
Ben moves. All in favor? Carried. We'll move into, I need a motion to recess for a public hearing. Looking for a motion for that. Donna makes that motion. All in favor? Carried. So I got to read my list bill here. So we'll call the public hearing to order. Everybody knows everybody. I'll open the public hearing. I have to request for verification that the notice of the public hearing has been conducted as required in the MGA.
Through the chair, it has been conducted as per the MGA.
Okay. Does anybody present have any objections to any member of the council presiding at the hearing? None seen. Is there any written submissions to be distributed to the members and the applicant? Please proceed.
All right. Good morning, Council. We have a public hearing for bylaw 2017-62 for redesignation. It is to redesignate 5 acres from agricultural general to country residential district within the Southwest 12824 west of the 4. The intent of the application is to separate out an existing homestead on the parent parcel with the remnant currently cultivated and an existing dwelling, farm building, and accessory structures within the proposed redesignation area. The relevant policy for this application includes the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan within the Strategic Plan and Implementation Plan for Agriculture, the Regional Growth Management Strategy sections 3.2.4 and 4.3, the Municipal Development Plan Policies 3.1 and 3.6, and Land Use Bylaw 2016-01, Section 9.3 for country residential. At the time the report was prepared, there were no letters of objection or approval for this application. And since the submission of the report, nothing else has been submitted from adjacent landowners through circulation. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anything from the applicant? Okay. Any persons want to speak in support of the application? Any final comments from staff? No. We're looking for a motion. Oh, sorry, I have to make a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor? Okay. So we'll move into planning development 2.11, request for a decision, bylaw 2017-62, public hearing.
Okay, so following the public hearing, we have a motion for council to potentially grant second and/or third reading of this bylaw. As previously mentioned, the intent of the application is to redesignate 5 acres from agricultural general to country residential to support a future subdivision with the balance to remain agricultural general. The location is adjacent to Township Road 280 and approximately 15.5 kilometers northwest of the village of Rockyford in District 6. For recommendation to council, staff is recommending that council grant second and third reading of bylaw 2017-62 to accommodate the future subdivision of the parcel. Option 1 has motion 1, bylaw 2017-62 be given second reading, with motion 2 that bylaw 2017-62 be given third and final reading. And below here are the response options that council has, and that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Motion?
I'll move that bylaw 2017-62 be given second reading.
All in favor? Carried.
I'll move that bylaw 2017-62 be given third and final reading.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 3.1A, unfinished business, resolution 1802.02, watch clerk positions.
At the AAMDC, which is now, I don't know, RMA, right, there we go. We had a chance to talk to K, Division K, the top dog there. And we discussed the night clerk, or the watch clerk, sorry. I'll get with this. Anyways, and the more I thought about it, the more I think that we have to give this a try. So I'm proposing that we support a watch clerk in the Strathmore detachment for a 1-year period on and it's just 1 year. We'll look at the results. We've got a meeting set up with the superintendent of the southern part, and we're going to, if we can figure out just some sort of way that we can track what it is now and what it will be, what it is a year from now, and then we just bring it up. We'll bring it up again 1 year from now. So it's a test, but my constituents want to see something done, and I think this is a relatively inexpensive thing that we can try, and we can try it now. We're not looking at it down the road 18 months. So at this time, I move that council approve the hiring of a watch clerk for 1 year for a maximum of $65,000 to commence upon an effective assessment apparatus being instituted by the RCMP to measure call volumes, etc.
Okay, thank you. Discussion?
Is this on top of the 2 that we agreed to cost share already?
Yeah, right now, what we did on the last, okay, yeah, so that is, there are 2 right now. We've agreed countywide to cost share the 2, which is like a per capita costing. Yeah, this is going to be a $65,000 hit right on top of that, but I think it's well worth the experiment.
Any other discussion?
Just in terms of because I know some of our discussion was around, like, is it fair to support the Strathmore RCMP when we have, like, obviously clearly demonstrated on this map, 5 RCMP detachments that serve Wheatland County? One of the rationales that I was thinking about that I think supports Tom's motion is that when we invited the RCMP here and met with all of the detachment commanders, when we spoke with them, none of them indicated that they required further administrative support at this time except Strathmore. So I would like to see our council work with our RCMP leaders and to help, like, do whatever we can to help the rural crime issue, which we know is significant. And so in terms of from a resident's perspective, are we supporting Drumheller? Are we supporting Gleason? Are we supporting Bicycle? Are we supporting Bazzano? Not at this time. But then I think that's something we just continue that ongoing conversation with those detachment commanders and see in the future if there's a need for support and the call volume in the county supports it. Then I think after that pilot project, we look at a more comprehensive plan. How do we support the RCMP detachments that serve Wheatland County? But at this point, I think Tom's idea is really good. It reflects the percentage of calls that are done within the county and kind of how, where they're majorly focused. So I support your motion.
So through the chair, so with your motion, that's on top, as has been stated, that's on top of the 2 existing watch clerk positions that we've already agreed to finance, right? Or is this separate from that? Are we funding this position on its own, or is it along with, so we're actually funding, we're funding 1 full one and 2 part-time positions? Yes. Positions. Did we not, when we were in Edmonton, when we were talking to the RCMP K Division, did they not say that they were looking into this and that they would be working with us to come to some kind of solution for us?
My understanding from what they said was that they had seen Strathmore's application to have the 4 watch clerks, that they had to do some kind of like application to a higher up RCMP department, probably K Division, to get that authorized to present that to the town. And that K Division had determined that the 4 watch clerk positions was a good approach to support the detachment, but that what they would help us is to develop some metrics or some measures, like Tom was talking about, some ways to evaluate this, because that was my big thing. I want to know how at the 1-year mark are we going to evaluate this and know whether we should continue it, whether it's a good use of public funds or not. And it sounds like they're willing to work with us to develop that, and then we'll have a good tool to evaluate it after the 1 year.
So how do we determine whether it's their program that's working or our program in providing this extra funding? Because they've they only started their activating that, I don't know if it's an undercover or whatever the hell they called it, in February. And they haven't had a chance to see if that works yet. So if it works, what's working? At the end of the year, what's working? Is it because we funded this or because they've done what they said they were going to do? That's my concern. If we throw too much at it, we're not going to know what's working. And it's also, my fear is that if the other ones are watching, they don't need it right now, but they're watching what we're doing. And if we're going to fund all this for one of them, next year they'll be at the table asking us for funding for exactly the same thing. So I would rather stay with just the 2 that we've agreed to share and see how that works for the year. And if that doesn't work, then at the end of that year, then revisit what Tom is proposing.
I think realistically, you can't assume that they're all going to ask for watch clerks, because if you look at the call volume breakdown, and I should have it in front of me, it would make my position stronger, but Bicycle virtually had no calls in the county of Wheatland, even though they provide service to a very small area of Wheatland County. Very similar for Bazzano, it was a very small percentage. Realistically, Gleason's percentage of their calls, I believe it was only 16% of their total call volume is Wheatland County. So we wouldn't be justified in providing the same type of support. So I think when we're looking at that support after the 1-year pilot project in Strathmore, you break it down based on the number of calls that detachment is doing in the county, and then you make that relative to their number of calls in total. So you find like a percentage of their work basically that's being done in the county, and then you determine whether we should be supporting that from a financial perspective. And it really didn't sound like I don't believe that Bazzano or Bicyker or Gleason would. Gleason did say they could use more support, but realistically, it shouldn't be us that's providing that when the when the vast majority of their calls are done for Siksika. And then Drumheller did say that they're getting good support from Drumheller, but I have no problem being fair and providing some support there too if they do require it. Just like we hope that Rocky View might consider providing some support to Strathmore Detachment because a large percentage of their calls are serving Rocky View County. So I think we do have to look at it from, like, to me it's statistics. You look at call volumes, total calls, what's the percentages, and then you allocate funds based on that. But what I'm looking at for Tom's proposal is that this is just a one-year pilot project. And I do think that we should be able to flesh out what is an effect from this initiative versus the rural crime initiative that the province instigated. They have like one intelligence team of, I think, did they say 3 officers or 4 officers for all of southern Alberta? So that's not going to have the same targeted impact on Wheatland County that like a complete watch clerk program for all of our officers at Strathmore Detachment will have.
I'm hoping I'm being a little bit optimistic, but I'm also thinking that if we can bring a watch clerk to the table so that we have 3 of the 4 positions funded, that Rocky View may come forward and say, look, this is the right thing to do. I don't know if that works in politics, but thanks, Ben. But I think we have to try, you know, we sit down there and we look at, like, Strathmore's got, they spend the better part of $2 million a year funding, of which 30% of that, I believe, is from the provincial government. It looks to me, who lives in the Strathmore area, that we could contribute a little bit more. That's,
So it would be the entire county paying for this position, not just those in the Strathmore division?
At this time, I don't think there's any way to break up any funding by division on anything.
And I would like to point out that, like, the RCMP were very clear that the different detachments do back each other up. So I can guarantee that if we had an issue east of Nemeka Road and it's in Gleason's, like, detachment area and they're not available to respond, Strathmore is responding. So it will benefit people outside of that area. Even with big MVCs, they're responding far outside of their kind of catchment area. So I think from a resident's perspective or a ratepayer's perspective, it will benefit the entire county as well.
With funding the 2 positions the proposed motion from the last time this was on the agenda, would we not be paying more than our call volume with funding this one as well?
From my calculations, no.
No.
Because out of those 2 positions that we're cost sharing on a per capita basis with the town of Strathmore and the villages, our percentage would be a little bit less than half of that, I believe, based on per capita. Actually, it will be significantly less than half because Strathmore's around 12,000, we're around 8,000, and then we have the villages as well. So whatever that percentage is.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it won't quite be 8,000 because I think the discussion previously was the area that was serviced by, so it'll be less than 8. I think it was around 6,000 actually, a little less than 6,000, if that makes sense.
But if we were to fund this proposed one that we're talking about now, we would,
It still puts it as at funding less than 2 positions, and Strathmore CMP, I believe 48% of their call volume is in the county. So,
but of that 48%, there was some in Rocky View as well.
no, that's Wheatland County. I
Just
believe.
Wheatland?
Oh, no, you're right. So there was
There's
a portion.
13% of the
right.
calls from Strathmore Detachment in Wheatland County.
When I looked at the statistics, the way that it's being formatted now, we are paying, it's fairly consistent.
Sorry, Alan, just to clarify, what is have we figured out the dollar amount for the motion that we'd passed previously?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have an exact dollar amount on me right at the moment. But
Yeah, did we come up with a formula or anything?
yeah, it would be based on our population. And I guess the commitment on the villages, so the villages still haven't made a decision on that.
Can we
right?
ballpark what we would be looking at?
Well, if it's 65,000 we're basing it on, and our population is 6,000, then I guess that would be basically a third. So probably about 20,000 in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Just a comment, would we be willing to discard the last motion made and just have the one watch clerk rather than the cost shared two?
I'd like to continue the previous motion because I think it values the input from the villages and gives them that little bit of buy-in with the RCMP as well, and hopefully gives them kind of some increased accountability from the RCMP in the way that this pilot project is done. I think they're really valuable to have involved in the project, but we have to keep it reasonable for their budgets as well.
I can see we could, in my mind, I could see we could, if we set ours up so that the county of Wheatland, I could bring a motion that the county of Wheatland is responsible for $65,000. And that would include both of these two, like, so my motion would, I mean, it's convoluted, but our motion would then just top up. Basically, what I'm trying to do is get the third watch clerk. I don't care how we do it. So if we're talking a per capita on the two in Strathmore, and then 3/4 of one or 7/64 of another one, I'm good with that. As long as we can get that third watch clerk, I think it'll make a difference.
Because the original ask was for Wheatland County to pay for one, I believe. So if we go with this proposed motion and the motion passed, we'd be doing more than what we were asked, which I'm not, that's great. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just think that why spend the money if they weren't asking for it? I'm more in favor of subsidizing Rockford and Standard with getting rid of the last motion than I am with subsidizing Rocky View County. Because right now, that's what we would be doing.
Well, subsidizing the town of Strathmore.
Yeah.
As an aside, I would like a friendly amendment on your motion just to take the actual dollar volume out. I would hate to not be able to fund a full position, and this is not answering the question about whether we should continue the first motion or not, but just in case there's like benefits or some, I would hate to say, oh, you can only be 0.9% because we capped it at 65,000 and then benefits exceeded that or something. So I would like it just to be one full-time watch clerk.
Can I hear the motion again? It was lengthy.
Okay, now just for my clarification, we do have a motion that we agreed to, Councillor Armstrong's motion, which is on the deal. What happens, can we kibosh this? Can we rescind it and then just do what I originally wanted? Sounds horribly.
That
So-
motion's as good as the next motion.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, that motion was to take this proposal to the regional partnership, which has been done.
Yes.
Which was indicated that the villages haven't had an opportunity to discuss this matter with their councils. So you fulfilled that obligation or that motion, I believe, because it was taken to the last regional partnership meeting, as you recall. So do you need to rescind that? It wasn't a motion to fund it. It was a motion to take that proposal forward. So I don't believe you need to rescind that in my estimation. You can just move forward on, but if you so choose, you could. I don't think you need to, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to redo I move. The motion I would
Sorry.
like to see.
Go ahead.
Perfect.
Can,
Could I ask you to amend your motion
Yes, sure.
without the per capita cost share?
So then, I'd move that we provide a watch clerk for a period of 1 year, and it will be funded by the county of Wheatland. And so, and it'll be dependent on some sort of test that the RCMP will provide for us for assessing call volumes. Yes, exactly, and it's a 1 year period only.
so, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Eichert, are you suggesting you're only funding one position now?
Yes.
Okay, and can you provide a commencement date when you would like to see that funded from? From when to when?
I would, yeah, I would start out on May 1st and go from May 1st to April 30th of 2018 to 2019. Not use that one.
So no per capita from the villages.
Right.
Okay. Any discussion on?
No, but if they give us some money, we'll take it.
No.
Okay, just between you and me.
I know.
Should we vote on Tom's motion? Let's vote on Tom's motion.
My only question then is that strictly for the areas surround, or is that all of Wheatland County? All of Wheatland County, for all the 8,000, not the 62 or whatever?
Okay. All in favor of Tom's motion? Opposed? Carried. Move on to 3.2A. 1, request for decision. Final operating budget 2018 to 2020.
Mr. Chairman, that's indicated as an appointment at 10 a.m.
Oh, sorry.
So that, no, that's fine. So 3.2A, so if we go to 3.2B, that would be fantastic.
My apologies. 3.2B1. Request for decision, public participation plan, road construction landowner meetings.
I'll move the recommendation. If there's any discussion, that's fine, but I'll move the recommendation as presented.
My question, in previous history, did we do this before?
Mr. Chairman, we have not presented a plan, but as per the new public participation policy, we are required to present a plan for any
Okay.
major advertising. That's why this is coming forward.
But we have followed a similar process in the last few years with the ratepayers in the areas. We've called the public meeting of those ratepayers and gone through that process.
Thank you.
I think it does help with the transparency so that the ratepayers know that anybody being affected by it is going to be compensated like equivalently, and it's all fair. I like it.
Absolutely.
Just for background, for the reason we put that in place in the first place was because staff was having so much trouble getting a hold of landowners when this was happening, and they couldn't get the clock started on some of these roads. So when we started putting that in place, it actually, once that meeting was called and if they didn't show up, that's fine, but the clock started ticking as to when that program, and then if we had to, they could drop it off and go to the next project. There was a time there we had one road that we were 6 or 7 years trying to get all the landowners, and it was a fairly major route, so we had to keep at it, but this cut that back down and and it was good. Everybody heard the same story at the same time, and it's worked good.
Other discussion? Okay, Councillor Armstrong has a motion on the floor. All in favor? Carried. Move on to 3.2B2, request for decision, Wheatland County Waste Transfer Site Hours. Some changes there. Any discussion?
Yeah, I do have discussion. I thought I brought it up when we talked about this last time.
Out of due respect, can I ask one of the staff members to come in and participate in this conversation? So maybe if you can go to the next one, I'll wait.
Sure.
For Mike to come in. Sorry, Jason.
We will move on to number 3C1, request for decision, the Ironman Calgary event. Recommendation that council approve Wheatland County in entering into an enhanced police agreement with the Minister of Justice and the Solicitor General for the purpose of paying the minister $3,585.00 to provide an enhanced level of police service by the RCMP on July 29, 2018, in order to accommodate Ironman's 70-.3 Calgary event. Further, that council approved directing administration to invoice Ironman 70.3 Calgary the amount of $3,585.00 in advance of the event in order to recover the full cost of the enhanced police agreement services.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
No. I spoke into the mic, you heard it. I just want to talk. This came before us once before, did it not?
Mr. Chairman, we hosted this, or this event was hosted in Wheatland County last year. It used to
Okay.
run west. So you might have heard about it from last year. So their route out towards Redwood Meadows, they weren't able to use that route, so now they're coming into the county. It's all on provincial roads for the most part. We do have some resources of our own that are tied up on this, so we certainly support this event in the county.
I was thinking that this, I think this has come to, in an agenda before.
I think we just got up.
Or was it
upping
just
the appropriate
information the
cost,
first?
right? We've already agreed to 3,100. Just upping it up, right?
There was a motion to make the agreement with the RCMP, if that's what you're thinking about, maybe, perhaps, I'm not sure.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I believe what it is just an increase. I think it did come before you, maybe it was January or February. I'm not sure, Margaret, if you can go back, but I think what happened was they didn't get the numbers correct, so they came back and said they wanted to increase it from 5 officers to 6 officers, the RCMP. So that's an increased amount of funding which has to come through the county in order for us to do the correct billing process.
I'll move the recommendation as it's cost neutral to the county because we're billing them back for it at the end of it. It's just to help them out with it, so I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Armstrong moves. Any recommendation, discussion? All in favor? Carried. Absolutely. If you want to see that, I'll do it. Won't go far, but I'll try. Let's go to 3.2C2, request for decision, Municipal Planning Commission and Subdivision Authority, Commission membership selection.
Can we go back to the waste transfer site now that Mike's here and just finish that, and then we'll go in camera for this one?
You want to go to camera for this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies once again.
Sorry.
We will go back to 3.0B2, request for decision, Wheatland County transfer site hours. Mr. Zier. Good morning.
So through the chair, you'll see your, on the proposal here for modifying the waste transfer site hours. Basically, we looked at a few of the trip visits to the transfer sites throughout the county, and looked at basically the later hours are less commonly visited. We get a lot more traffic between 9 and 10 in the morning. So we talked a little bit about it earlier in the, or late last year, of changing it from a 9 to 5, summer 10 to 6, winter and 10 to 6 summer. But looking at the visits in there, I think having a consistent 9 to 5 across the board here would make a lot more sense for visits, as well as not remaining open too late in the day. Discussion about that?
Thanks.
I had a request from a resident that Carsland has 2 employees, two on Saturday and 2 on Monday. And they were wondering the reason if they could take and have it open all the time, taking one of those employees, putting them Thursday and one on Friday, so that it was open every day of the week, if that was possible. I just wanted to put that question out there.
Right. So the reason we brought on the extra employee about 2 years ago was the huge amount of visits that both Strathmore or Wheatland West and Carsland get. I think if we were to go that route, we would have to man the site with an extra employee for those days that we would open, just because we're getting double the amount of traffic there that we do in the one-manned sites. You look at the daily totals, and they are upwards of double, if not triple in some cases. So that's why we brought the extra staff member on. I wouldn't want to leave these sites vulnerable by having just one staff, even on these, because the people will come if you're open. The traffic will spread out, but it will still be fairly high intensity there. So if we did want to, if council wanted to go that road, I would recommend remaining with 2 employees at all times at these sites.
So just between Wheatland West and Carsland, with the extra day, like what manpower extra is that? Because Wheatland West closed one day and Carsland closed 2, so that extra day being open or closed, how much manpower does that entail?
It would be the 16 hours per day for the 8 hours for each employee for the additional days there.
So just Wheatland West, the 2 employees, they work 6 days a week then? Is that how that works, or do we pull them off as somewhere else? I'm just.
Oh.
No, I'm a farmer. I work 6 days a week, 7 days a week, whatever days. Would there be any issue with, other than the extra 16 hours, with the employees at Carsland to go to be open 5 days as opposed to 4?
For Carsland. So through the chair, without speaking to the operators, I'm not sure if they have prior commitments on those days off. If they do, we might have to look at like I say, bringing on another staff member, a couple of staff members. Definitely something we can investigate if council wants to go that route.
Yeah, I don't think they wanted to put more money, us to have to pay more money. I think instead of the Monday having the 2, maybe having the Friday open with 1. But I understand now that you're having the Monday because of Wheatland West being closed Monday. Is that the? I think they just need to understand.
Yeah, through the chair, not necessarily. Basically, those dates were just picked. I'm not sure exactly the reason. They've been set at these dates for quite a long time. Like I say, we've done extensive traffic counts on these sites for the last 5 years, so we could look at, I'm sure if we open it another day, we're going to get the same amount of traffic, slightly less, but the same intensity. We're still going to need additional manpower. I wouldn't want to put it back to a one-person site. it's just a constant flow of traffic in those, so. So, yeah, we could move the dates around. I don't think that's going to change the amount of people coming, just the days they're going to come.
And there was some identification too coming for county residents, correct? Some kind of card or something in the future?
That's correct. Through the
Yeah.
chair, we're going to implement a card holder, basically a resident identification system. And in the summer here, that's going to denote which residents are actually county residents. I think we're going to get a lot of big impact on the west here. In the east, I don't think it'll be that much of a change, but I think we'll see a reduced flow because of that. I think we have quite a few town residents and out-of-county residents utilizing those sites.
There was also a question about the give and take was taken away. I don't know the background on it at all. The reason why it was taken out.
Yeah, through the chair, we just found a lot of issues, like you will at any give and take with products being brought in that aren't necessarily in good condition. We don't want to, we had to throw a lot of things away. It was quite a lot of work to clean up these sites. Like you see in Strathmore, they spend a lot of manpower maintaining those sites, making sure that any garbage that's brought in is removed. And it just became too much for the site, for the operators to maintain that. We've only had a couple of requests that I'm aware of in the past to have that reopened, so.
Through the chair, any of the ones, this is through Drumheller Solid Waste, and we've looked into that for Drumheller too, any of the ones that are successful and are making a go of that have to man the sites when they're open. They have to be, not just with the attendant that's there, but they have to man that site and monitor what's coming in and what's going out.
So if a group wanted to do something like that, that's what they do, if they form and manage it themselves? Okay, I understand.
There was quite a few residents that have approached me about that through election.
Thanks. Any questions? No? We're looking
I'll
for,
move the recommendation that we go to the new hours for the sites.
okay, Councillor Armstrong moves the approve the recommendation of staff. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Just a quick question, if I could, through the chair to Mike. Those ID cards, are you going to have lots of them? Those ID cards, we may end up having to do that more out through our area too, because of the ones out of that area that are using the landfill for a transfer site rather than using the transfer sites, because we're charging now for everything that comes over the scale, and we're getting some kickback from some of the residents because they don't have a transfer site on the north end unless they come into the Hazar area, and they don't come that way. So that 50,000, does that cover enough ID cards that we could hand some out in that area also?
So through the chair, the basic background with this ID card is that every resident, every landowner will receive one of these cards. I'm just saying it'll be less utilized, I think, in the east side.
Everybody gets it?
Everyone gets it, for sure.
okay.
Yeah, we're not going to differentiate between where your land location is, because a resident out there may decide to come over here to dump the garbage on the way to Calgary. So, no, definitely everyone's going to receive one of those cards. Yeah, one. For sure. One, we're going to look at the tax system and hopefully not go the same route with the parcel location. We're going to look at making sure that one landowner, one parcel owner receives a card. So if they have 5 parcels, they're still just going to receive one card. So we won't have any duplications or anything like that.
Thanks.
Mike, will there be any mechanism for people that might live in the county but not necessarily own land to acquire a card? Like say you had a multi-family farm, but all of the land is owned by the farm or a parent, but you have multiple generations farming that farm? Could there be an application process where other residents could acquire cards?
For sure, through the chair, we're going to look at all those alternatives. We're going to have an application form for renters, for landowners that live outside of the county but own land in the county. We'll make sure that we cover all those bases on there. Yeah, it'll be a little more onerous because they will probably have to come in to apply in person to prove out that they do own land or live in the county, that sort of thing. But we'll accommodate all those sorts of things. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Thanks, Mike. No, we didn't. Oh, sorry. My apologies. Yes. Sorry, Councillor Armstrong put a motion to accept as presented and to approve the recommendation from staff. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we can skip past the MPC down to 3.2C3, please.
Yes. So 3.3C is Carsland Fire Hall Station Architectural Building Design Project. Angie.
Good morning, Council. So you have before you staff's recommendation to award the winning proposal of the architectural building design project to Sahuri and Partners Architecture Incorporated for a total cost of $127,500 to create the design, drawings and construction documents for the proposed new Carsland Fire Hall. So we went through a fairly lengthy process last fall with a design build process, but it didn't work out the way we wanted it to work out. So we decided to stop the process and restart it using a different methodology. So this methodology was started again in late fall last year, and it garnered us a better amount of proposals with more of what we were looking for regarding how they would work with the county, with administration, be more flexible in the design approach and the modeling and construction type, et cetera, and costing. So we went through the review process. There was a number of great proposals. We had a committee made up of administration who reviewed the proposals, and the final proposal is the one in front of you from Sahuri. The RFP closed on March the 1st, and there was 12 proposals all in all. We got together as a group about 3 different times through the review process, and this was the final one. We feel very comfortable with this proposal. So this is the recommendation from administration to council for this phase 1 part of the new Carsland Fire Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Going forward, are we going to be able to use this plan for the, because we'll probably halls built in the years to come? Will this be a sort of a standardized plan that we're going to be going, or is this a one-off?
We're looking to make this more of a standardized plan. I mean, the site changes a little bit, so, but this was our approach through the RFP. So that because as you say, we know that we have probably another 2 fire halls to do in the future. So reducing that upfront costing and then making sure moving forward we get the correct construction costs will be more fiscally efficient for the county in the future.
And just I'm not sure if we need, like, I prefer that if we go with a more utilitarian looking building. I don't think we need to be building anything that needs to be really fancy looking, because every time I go past the waterworks building in the city of Calgary, I just go nuts because, most expensive construction this side of Chinook Center. So I just, hopefully that we, yeah, exactly.
Not too much architectural design, is what you're
No.
saying? Yes. Yeah.
Functionality.
I too am in support of having a plan that would be something that modular. So, you know, upsize, downsize, then we know what we're gonna fund. It's a little easier.
No, I know through the chair, when I was on the school board, we were looking at these same things with these schools are bringing in. And I agree with you, Tom, some of them are way out of line, but we had looked at, give us one design that works for everything and we build them all the same, to save some costs on architects. You can build every one of them the same, you pay the same price for architects on every single one of them. They get their pound of flesh no matter how you do it, so.
Okay, any other discussion? Yeah. Donna?
I'd like to make the motion to approve the recommendation of to administration to award the winning proposal of agricultural building design project to Sahara and Partners, the total cost of $127,500 to create the design drawings and construction documents for the proposed new Carsland Fire Hall.
Okay, Councillor Bigger has a motion on the floor to approve. All in favor? Carried. We'll move on to 3.2C4. Request for a decision, capital request. Hazara Fire Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judy Unsworth is unable to be here today, though she has put the RFD together for you here. If there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or concerns?
No questions or concerns, but I see that everybody signed off on it, so they must be all right with it. So I'll move the acceptance of the recommendation, unless staff has some concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff has no concerns. I know that Judy spoke at length with all the fire associations, and she let me know last week that everyone was comfortable with this.
Any discussion, questions, concerns from anybody else? Councillor Armstrong has a motion on the floor. All in favor? Carried. I think we got some time for 10 o'clock. We'll go to reports, then we'll do the Reeves, 4.1A. Go ahead. 10? Okay. Yes, let's take a break for 5 minutes and then we'll jump into the financial. It's okay? Reconvene at 10? And we're back. We have a 10 o'clock appointment. 3.2A. You have the floor.
Good morning, Council. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to present the final operating budget. Today I'm going to present the final operating and capital budget. Kind of the format I'm going to do today is first present the operating budget, the final operating budget, and then present the final capital budget. So on November 21st, Council passed the interim capital and operating budgets. The reason for those is to provide staff direction on which projects to do authorization for the expenditure of money. And then the reason for the final budget in April is to update any projections. The requisitions are a very, very large piece of the county, and we don't receive those requisitions until this fiscal year. So all the requisitions are usually received by the end of March. So that's kind of the timeline of why we bring back a final budget in April. In 2017, the final operating budget was approved on April 4th. Today is April 3rd, so we're pretty much on pace with last year as well. So just some high-level notes. After all of the changes were made, which changes are requisitions provided by the province or other bodies, and projections provided by staff and management, the overall net change to the budget is $52,483. and that's a decrease in the original costs provided to council on November 21st. So similarly to the budget on November 21st, there's a changes page. So the changes paid can be found on page 48 of your agenda package. This page, on this page, it's very similar to the November 21st interim budget. So all of these changes are highlighted in yellow, and the only things highlighted in yellow are the changes that were made from November 21st to April 3rd today. We purposely illustrate these changes because there is a significant amount of data in the budget. There's 75 pages, so it would be unfair to not identify these changes. So there is 3 pages of changes. I'm going to go through some of the changes just to kind of let you guys know some of the significant changes. So the requisitions that were received by the county in 2018, we received our education requisition, our seniors lodging requisition, the Drumheller waste requisition, the library requisition, our fire dispatch requisition, and a new requisition that we received in 2018 is the DIP requisition. The DIP requisition is the contract that was signed and sent over to the province, I believe, by the end of February this year. So just to give council a general overview of this sheet right here. So kind of how the changes are broken out is that here is the general ledger code. So the general ledger code is the unique identifier to each account, or what the expenditure is. The description is just something that comes right out of our accounting software. The department is where the cost or revenue is. The April 3rd is today's date, which is the updated numbers. November 21st is the interim approved budget. The difference is just a subtraction of April 3rd from November 21st, and then the total difference. I've tried to provide a reason for the change for all of them. There is something in there for each one. Some are a little bit more vague than others, but any change that were made were something that was either based on a requisition or a staff recommendation. Typically, to balance the budget, kind of the trick that administration uses here in this case is that if the expenses are over or under, ideally they're very low. In this situation, they were. So 54,000 in a $47 million budget is very, very low. It's less than 1%. So what we do to balance that budget is that we just increase a reserve, a transfer to a reserve. So in this case, it's putting money aside for the future. I can go over again, maybe just some of the account coding structure, just so if council has any questions about it. So the example I used in November was the salaries code. So what we try to do is we try to be very consistent from expenditure to expenditure. So right here, the 2,100, that kind of represents the actual cost of what it is. So the salaries code in legislative, that's going to be some staff costs that are broken out to this cost department. The two at the very start identifies that it's an operating expense. The second string in the numbers identifies the actual department. So in this case, it's legislative. The 2,100, as explained, is the object identifier. So it can be salaries, critical illness, CPPEI, contracted services. All those numbers will change, and they should be consistent throughout each department. So an example here, legislative, the salaries code is 2,100. If we move to the next two departments, so administrative, salaries administrative, that same code you'll see is 2,100. And then I'll just go to the next department, in assessment as well, it's going to be 214 is the assessment, or 1214 is assessment department, and the salaries is again 2100. So what we try to do is we make those object codes the same, so we can compare cost year over year by object. There's some other costs in the budget as well. I'd just like to go back over. One is the cancellation of taxes. So the cancellation of taxes, we have an allowance of 200,000. Oops. We have 200,000. So in this line specifically, there's estimates that management needs to make on a year-by-year basis. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of unknowns that we don't know about. So in this situation, we put a $200,000 allowance in here. So typically what is done is if the 200,000 isn't used, then what we can do is we can transfer that amount into a reserve for a future either assessment appeal or if there is a cancellation of taxes in the future. This past year is a good example. So in previous years, 2016, 15 and 16, there was an assessment appeal that occurred in the county which resulted in a swing of taxation revenue. So in 2017, there was no assessment appeals. So the amount of cancellation of taxes was very low. There is assessment changes that happen throughout the year that cause cancellation of taxes or just a change in taxation revenue. So that 375,000 was transferred to a reserve this year. So that money is now set aside for future use. There's other items in the budget that have been passed by previous council that we follow. Two examples are the Strathmore Fieldhouse, so the fieldhouse that's being constructed, a resolution and agreement signed by staff and agreed to by council is that the county is responsible for 30% of the operating loss of the fieldhouse. So in that case, the fieldhouse, as we know, is not in operation yet. So 75,000 is set aside for an allowance. In that case, if it's not used, then it's transferred to reserve, the recreation reserve for future use. Another example is the Golden Hill School Division Gymnasium project. Council passed a resolution a few years ago that the county will contribute 125,000. So all of these amounts are built into the budget. Another item I'd like to discuss is just in general, like public works expenses, so that it varies from year to year. A good example is like parts on machinery and equipment. So in 2017, we had a significantly warmer summer than in 2016. One item that we observed in our budget to actuals and year-to-date costs year over year is that our parts and fuel were higher than 2016. One item that I looked up and provided to our financial statement auditor this year of an explanation why is that in 2017, there was 10 days that were over 30 degrees, which means more dust, more parts, equipment's running longer. And in 2016, there was only one day that was over 2016. There's also other variables such as the commodity prices, and just federal, provincial, any additional gas tax or carbon tax that the county does have to pay. A significant expense here, or a significant change, most of the changes in the operating actually came from the WRC. So in late November, I believe, an agreement was reached that 3 full-time employees from the county are now working at the WRC. So a lot of the changes in the budget are employment expenses, so CPP, EI, salaries, LAPP, and now it's being billed from the WRC. So One other change in the budget is a non-cash expense, is the amortization that's changed. So amortization, as we know, it's a non-cash expense, so it's something that doesn't physically leave our bank account. The amortization is a best management estimate of the fair market value of our equipment. In 2016, the county used a method that was rating each piece of equipment by the hours of use. It was identified through research from other MDs that the units of use per hour was an uncommon practice in Alberta and throughout Canada. And what we did was we streamlined our accounting software, so our amortization made it a little bit easier. And realistically, this is just a management estimate. So one item that we adjusted was the amortization of public works machinery and equipment. So this number increased by 2.6 million. So I think that we just need to remember that this is a non-cash expense, and it's only an accounting estimate used to determine the fair market value of our assets in the county. So realistically, when something's amortized more, if this piece of machinery or equipment is sold, the only difference is that it's going to be a gain on sale or a loss on sale. Again, a non-cash expense, just an accounting estimate. So that amortization number is important because it does provide us information on the unit or any piece of machinery, how much time is left on it, what's the cash value of this that we believe we may receive at market. And there's a lot of factors with that as well, because the market could be receptive to the sale of machinery, and we could book a big gain on our thing or on the machinery that's sold, or it could be vice versa. Another item I'd like to discuss is the taxation revenue from from this year. So there has been no change to any taxation revenue in this budget from the approved. So in the November 21st, there was going to be the revenue increase was 1% on residential and farmland and 1.54% on all other classes. So that's machinery and non-residential. Just to give council a little bit of an idea of the assessment value change from year over year, there was a 0.3% increase on all classes of assessment. There was no change in farmland. There was about a 4% increase on residential assessment, and that can be due to a variety of factors, such as new construction, just increased value. And the non-residential and M&E, machinery and equipment, that assessment went down 1.2%. With that being said, I believe there's a assessment 101 scheduled for April 9th for council, which will explain a little bit more of the assessment changes. Part of the scope of the budget and the mill rate is that the budget must be passed with the taxation revenue, and then the mill rates are set. So the budgeted revenue is very important to set first. Well, it's regulated by the MJ. We have to pass it first. The transfers to reserves. So the only change in the transfers to reserves was the 54,000 as discussed, and that was an increase transfer to, so saving for the future. The taxation revenues year over year are fairly consistent here. As you can see, the year-to-date actuals versus the budget, we try to be very consistent as possible. Those changes were the 1% I discussed and the 1.54% on all other classes. Just a little bit of update on, or I guess the total revenue that the county receives, it's about 89% of taxation revenue. So it's a significant source of the county's actual operating revenue. The other items I'd just like to discuss is the grants that the county receives. So the MSI operating, we receive about 125,000 annually. This did not change from year over year. We may have received a little bit more. Our ASB grant, we receive about 240,000 annually. There's no change in the budget for this either. One positive item to note is that in 2018, we've received word from the province that we're going to receive an additional 186,000 for ASB. That's due to one of our ASB staffs applying for that grant and receiving it. So I'm not exactly sure what project we're working on. I know if they had mentioned it to me, but I just can't remember off the top of my head. And then there's some employee grants that we received, so summer grants through the province of Alberta. I believe just this last week we received word that we have been approved for 5 summer students. So that's another little bit of additional funding that will be coming in the door. Throughout the year, there's also additional grants that we receive. We try to keep council in the loop as best as possible. I believe I bring them every monthly report that I have, so. That's all I have for the operating budget. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any question?
Can you just speak to the contracted services for IDP and ICF? And is any of that cost recoverable from the province? Like I see 500,000 budgeted for 2018, and another 500,000 for 2019 and 350,000 for 2020.
So the original amount was 750,000 identified for IDP ICFs, and we've reduced that to 500,000 for this year. We'll be hiring some contracted staff, and Angie and I will be sitting down later this week to discuss that a little bit further. That's mandated by the province. Is that recoverable? Yes, we can apply for grants, and we did through the ACP, but we were not successful because we applied for other ACP grants, and we were successful on the one other one for the contaminated sites. So we will make an application for 2018-19 for ACP grants funding as well. What I'm understanding is they are giving some funds out for some of that work to some of the smaller municipalities, but not to the larger ones, it seems. So, so that's kind of where that's at. So.
Go ahead.
So from November, I'm just trying to figure something out here. From November of last, like, so on the 8th to this one, there's a $58,000 difference. Okay, so if I go to the operating budget and I go down to Gleason, Gleason now is at 700. We're going to provide water to Gleason for 709,000, and the other in November it was 385,000. That's a difference of about 3.25. Like, where does that, like, this is probably not the right place, but I just don't understand how we can go from, we can be that far off on our estimate in 5 months. Like, we were going to pay $385,000 a year for water for Gleason, and with a 2 or 3% increase going forward in November, and now we're talking 709,000 with a 2 or 3% increase going forward in the coming year. So I don't know, can you speak to that?
So the information I have is what's provided by management. Kind of my position in this work is to ensure that the balanced budgets ask questions to management on specific projects that they're working on. Perhaps Mike and Dave could provide further analysis on this.
Great. So through the chair, there was some modifications you see in all of our water and wastewater utility projections. The previous budget presented to you had the existing salaries for our staff there prior to them being acquired by the Wheatland Regional Corporation. So because of that, we went through and we took out all the salaries, all the benefits, everything like that through the staff members that went over there and incorporated the fees that WRC will be charging us now. So you'll see in the budget here we have basically put it as a percentage for manpower across the different hamlets. We broke it down. I think it's 45,000 for Rosebud. And I think it's consistent across for the other hamlets. We just kind of separated it for the estimated amount of time that they would be spending in each of those hamlets. As far as Gleason in particular, there is an increase because of the projected cost to operate that system. It won't be 709,000. If you see in that, included in that estimate, there's also amortization of the system. There's a few other supplies, Gleason water. That's for the hamlet, for the distribution system, as well as the treatment system within this, the pump house. So there's an increase. I think to get into that actual number, I think we're going to discuss that a little bit more at the committee of the whole meeting next week, where we look at the budget that has been proposed to us from WRC and break down the numbers as to how they came up with this. This is a number that was presented to us as a cost to operate that system, so we put it in the budget here to verify that we had the numbers. We'll just have a little more discussion about it on Monday there.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, questions, concerns?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one change in this budget.
Yep.
And that's to add $65,000 for the watch clerk that council approved earlier. None of our staff had knowledge of that. So we'll add that to the budget before council considers making an approval.
One item to note on top of that is that we can, if it is 65,000, we can do a transfer from the operating continuity reserve.
Do that right now? We have to have a motion to make a transfer from what Brian said?
Sure. So what we could do is maybe save if there's additional questions or comments. If the operating budget is approved today, we can accept that motion and in addition have the 65,000 of the watch clerk. I'm not sure if it's a contracted service or if a contracted service, and a transfer of 65,000 to offset that from the operating continuity reserve.
Do we have to make, pardon me, do we have to make hard changes to the budget before we can approve it, or just as amended? Okay. Questions, issues? Want to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the 2018 through 2020 operating budget as presented and amended.
All in favor? Carried. We'll move on. We'll move on to the capital budget, 3.2A2.
Okay, so on page 128 of your agenda package is the RFD for the capital budget. Starting on page 130 is the actual budget. So on page 131 is a summary, very similar to the operating budget. The format is the exact same as the operating. So we have revenues and expenditures. To note for the capital budget, all projects must have a funding source. All the funding sources can be found on page 3 of the capital budget. Page 3 of the capital budget is 133 on your agenda. So just to let council know, there's a total decrease of capital projects of 2.67 million. So this is due to Council and Public Works Department updating their capital roads projects and reprioritizing the plans. So any change on the budget, again, is highlighted in yellow throughout the budget, and it's also on pages 132 and 133 of your agenda package. Also wading through this, we've also received our updated provincial and federal grant figures. They're comparable to prior year. In addition, I've provided a transfer or a reserve schedule at the back of the last page of the agenda, or of the capital budget package, my apologies. So that kind of provides council an indication of if every single project were to happen in fiscal 2018 and every project was on budget, this is where the reserves would be at the end of the year. And that reserve schedule is on page 166 of your agenda package. So just the same format. This is the general ledger code. The general ledger codes for capital are a little bit different. So 6 is a capital expenditure. The second and third string identify the departments. So administration is 1202. Unpaved roads is 3208. Equipment is 3300. I've also put the department beside each one's for council's viewing. Again, the same thing, April 3rd compared to November 21st, the change, the reason for change, and then at the bottom, the cumulative total of the 2.6 million in reduction. Also, one different item here that I'd like to mention to council, or at least highlight, is the funding sources of the budget. So there's a bunch of different sources. So the reserve funding is the most significant source, which is at 28 million. Accumulated surplus, that's kind of just additional funds that the county has that aren't restricted. So in the reserves, they're restricted amounts set aside for specific purposes. The unallocated surplus is just an amount that isn't restricted. So they're kind of the same source, but one's restricted and one is not. The provincial funding is just the updated grant funding that we know that we received from the province. That was maybe 2 weeks ago or this past week. The federal is federal gas tax. Long-term debt, that's for, I believe, the Rosebud wastewater project. It's under the Rosebud water, wastewater. And then the proceeds on sale of assets. So that's when, as I discussed earlier, when we go to market and sell machinery, we try to make sure that our machinery is well maintained in the best possible condition. So when we do go to market, we can fetch top dollar for it. And that's all I have for the capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the, and it may be that I just forgot something, but on the Gleason transfer site, it shows that we're buying Crown land. What are we buying down there? What's it for? We're not buying the transfer site. What is it, land attached to it, or $80,000 for Gleason transfer site for land purchase? Crown land.
Yeah, so through the chair, that is a parcel of land just adjacent to the existing transfer site. We've actually retained the lease on it for a number of years. We are in the process of cleaning it up, reclaiming it, and then utilizing it for a stockpile site. We've been in talks with the province for a couple of years on that one, actually.
Okay.
Because rather than have them require a full reclamation on it, we're able to do a partial cleanup of it and then take ownership of it, and we've been utilizing it for.
So it has nothing to do with the lease on the transfer?
Nothing
okay.
on that, no.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns?
I'll move that council approves the 2018 to 2022 capital budget as presented.
Motion on the floor from Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to 4.1A in reports.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you to go to 3.2C
Yes.
2 on the Municipal Planning Commission subdivision. And since we're going to be talking about applicants, we would request that council consider going in camera for section 17 of FOIP, disclosure harmful to personal privacy, with Ms. Lucas and myself from staff being the only 2 staff members in attendance.
Okay. Council understand? So we'll put that part into in camera. Back to 4 point, we'll do in camera at the end of the day, right?